The moment I stepped off that crowded bus after 16 exhausting hours on the road, my heart was pounding with a kind of joy I hadn't felt in years. My granddaughter was coming into this world. And despite every ache in my back and the stiffness in my legs, I felt lighter than air. I had rehearsed it all in my mind, how I would walk into that hospital room, how my son Daniel would smile wide and say, "Mom, you made it," and how his wife Alina would finally soften toward me once she placed that baby girl in my arms. I thought the sight of their newborn would melt everything that had ever kept us distant. I believed, foolishly, maybe, that a child could heal what adults had broken, but the universe had a different kind of lesson waiting for me. Before I get into that moment, make sure you hit the subscribe button so you never miss stories like this. Stories that hit deep, twist hard, and leave you thinking long after they end. When I walked through the hospital corridor, carrying the small gift bag I had saved up to buy, I was clutching hope as tightly as the straps digging into my fingers. Everything smelled like antiseptic and quiet anticipation. I kept imagining Daniel's face when he saw me. Even after all the distance between us, he was still my boy. He still called me when things were hard, still told me he loved me during the holidays. So I believed, God help me. I truly believed I was welcome. Then he stepped out of the delivery room. At first, he looked tired, overwhelmed, and emotional in that new father kind of way. But when his eyes met mine, something flickered, something uneasy, almost guilty. It hit my stomach like cold water, but I ignored it. I smiled, opened my arms, and whispered, "I'm here, sweetheart. I made it." He didn't hug me. Instead, he glanced over his shoulder, lowered his voice, and said, "Mom, listen. Alina wants only her family in the room." I blinked. I don't understand. I'm her family too. He swallowed hard. "Mom, she never really looked. Just don't push it, okay? She never wanted you here." It felt like someone had slapped me across the face in front of the entire world. 16 hours on the road, all that money spent, all that hope I'd been carrying. It all crumbled at my feet like broken glass. But he wasn't finished. "She's tired," he added weakly, "and you know how she is. If you walk in, it's just going to stress her out. Please don't make things harder right now." I stood there, feeling the sting burning behind my eyes, but I refused to cry in front of him. I refused to give anyone the satisfaction of seeing me break. So I did the only thing I could. I nodded. My lips trembled as I said, "Of course, I understand." The lie tasted bitter. I walked out of that hospital like a ghost. The gift bag felt heavier than before, my footsteps slower, my breath tight. In the elevator, when the doors finally closed, that's when the tears came. Slow, silent, unstoppable. I had come all this way to meet my granddaughter, and instead, I was pushed aside like an inconvenience, like a stranger who wandered in by mistake. I didn't blame the nurses. I didn't blame the staff. I blamed the two people who made that choice. And they knew exactly how much it would hurt me. When I got home, my body felt 20 years older. I didn't call Daniel. I didn't text. I didn't send congratulations. I wrapped the small baby blanket I had knitted and placed it back into my dresser drawer, closing it gently as if I was laying something precious to rest. 3 days passed. 3 days of me trying to swallow that lump in my throat, trying to accept that maybe I was never meant to be part of my granddaughter's life, and trying to convince myself that silence was better than begging for scraps of affection. On the third afternoon, my phone rang, an unfamiliar number. I almost ignored it, but something told me to pick up. "Ma'am," a woman said, "I'm calling from Ridgeview Medical Center. You're listed as a financial emergency contact for Daniel and Alina." My breath hitched. "Yes, is everything okay?" Her next words were sharp enough to cut through bone. "The delivery bill is short, $20,000. The insurance didn't cover several complications, and your son requested that we contact you for the remaining balance." For a moment, I couldn't speak. I couldn't even think. My mind replayed Daniel's words at the hospital. "Mom, she never wanted you here. Don't push it." And now, suddenly, when money was involved, when they needed something from me, now, I mattered. The silence stretched on so long that the woman on the phone finally asked, "Ma'am, are you still there?" I let out a breath I didn't know I had been holding, and in that breath was 16 hours of travel, years of strained relationships, and the brutal pain of being turned away at the happiest moment of my son's life. "Yes," I said quietly, "I'm here." But what came next didn't come quietly at all. "Please tell my son and his wife," I said, my voice steady and colder than I expected. that I will not be paying a single penny, not one. He told me his wife only wanted her family, so they can ask her family to pay the hospital bill. The line went silent. It wasn't anger. It wasn't revenge. It was clarity. Pure clarity. For once in my life, I chose myself. I hung up before she could speak, feeling something inside me finally settle. It wasn't anger. It was release. For the first time, I chose peace over pain. And as I sat alone, I understood that sometimes a firm no is the beginning of healing for me now. After I hung up that call, I sat there staring at the wall, letting the weight of my own words settle in the air. It didn't feel triumphant. It didn't feel dramatic. It just felt necessary, like something I should have done years ago but never dared to. A quiet boundary, a line drawn not out of spite, but out of survival. The kind of moment that arrives when life finally pushes you too far, and you realize that if you don't stand up for yourself now, you never will. But even with that clarity, the emotions didn't disappear. I'm still a mother, and mothers don't stop caring just because they're hurt. I spent the rest of the day wondering what Daniel might think when he heard my answer. Would he be angry? Shocked? Would he finally feel even a fraction of the pain he handed me in that hospital hallway? Or would he call me defensive and blaming, like he used to whenever things didn't go his way? I didn't know. And honestly, I didn't know which version of him I feared more. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him standing there again, avoiding my gaze as he told me to walk away from the moment I had waited my whole life for. A grandmother's first meeting with her grandchild, denied, erased, as if I had no place in their world at all. But then, another image took over. The delivery bill, $20,000. It wasn't a small oversight or an unexpected hiccup. It was a life-altering debt. One they thought I'd just silently swallow because I always had before, because I always saved them from consequences, because I always played the role of the dependable, self-sacrificing mother. They didn't want me at the hospital. They didn't want me in their family. They didn't want me in the room for the birth. But suddenly, they wanted my wallet. But hypocrisy of it burned like acid. So, the next morning, when my phone buzzed again, my stomach tightened. I didn't want to answer. I already knew who it was before I even looked. I let it ring until it stopped. Then it rang again, and again, and again. Daniel never called me this much, not even on my birthday. Around the fourth call, the vibration felt like a hammer against my chest. I didn't want to hear his voice, because I knew what he'd do. He'd turn it around, make himself the victim, pretend it was all a misunderstanding, say he didn't mean it that way, try to manipulate me with guilt the same way he'd done since he was old enough to understand what guilt even was. So I didn't answer, not yet. Hours passed, the phone finally stopped ringing. The silence afterward felt too loud, but it also felt honest, real, peaceful, in a strange way. Later in the afternoon, I sat by the window, sipping tea, trying to distract myself with the movement of people passing by outside, families, couples, kids, running after each other. Everyone looked so wrapped up in their own worlds, and I wondered if somewhere, at that very moment, Daniel was holding his newborn daughter, telling someone else how hard his life was, how unfair, how his own mother refused to help him in their moment of need. Would he mention the part where he pushed me away, the part where he told me his wife didn't want me around, the part where I cried alone in an elevator, wiping tears before anyone could see? I doubted it. People often rewrite stories to protect their own pride. The sun began to dip, painting the sky orange. I thought the day might end quietly, without chaos. But chaos has its own sense of timing. At 6:17 p.m., there was a knock at my door, a firm one, not the kind a neighbor uses, not the kind a delivery driver uses. No, this was the kind of knock someone uses when they're not asking to come in, they're demanding it. I froze. For a moment, I considered not answering. I could have pretended I wasn't home, but instinct overpowered caution. Mothers can recognize their child's presence even without seeing them. Something in my bones told me exactly who was on the other side. I opened the door. Daniel stood there, tired, pale, dark circles under his eyes. He looked like a man whose world had started to collapse, and he didn't know how to hold the pieces together. For a second, my heart softened, remembering the little boy who used to run to me with scraped knees and wide eyes. But then reality forced its way back in. He didn't come here to apologize. He came here because he needed something. "Mom," he said, breathless, as if he'd rushed all the way. "Why didn't you answer your phone?" I stepped aside just enough for him to enter but stayed near the door, a boundary, not spoken, but clearly felt. He walked past me, running a hand through his messy hair. We're in trouble. The hospital, look, their threatening collection. We don't have that kind of money. I thought you understood that. I took a slow breath. I understood perfectly. He stopped pacing and faced me. His confusion wasn't subtle. It hit his face hard. Then why did you tell them no? Why would you do that? Why? I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the question was absurd. Why would I help people who treated me like I didn't matter? Why would I pay for a moment I wasn't allowed to be part of? Why would I give when I was never given even the smallest measure of respect? Because, I said softly, your wife made it clear she didn't want me there. She didn't want me involved. She didn't want me part of your family. And you agreed. His jaw clenched. Mom, it was a stressful moment. You're taking it the wrong way. No, I replied, steady and unshaken. I'm finally taking it the right way. He stared at me, speechless for the first time in a long time, and then, as if the truth threatened him, he took a step closer, lowering his voice. Mom, he said, please, just this once. Help us, just this once. It was always just this once. Not anymore. Daniel, I whispered. No, he blinked. No, no, and for the first time, he understood I meant it. Daniel stared at me as if I'd spoken a language he'd never heard before. A simple word, no, but to him, it must have sounded like betrayal. His face twisted, shifting between shock, disbelief, and a rising anger he was trying hard to disguise. I could see it in the tightness around his mouth, in the way his shoulders stiffened, in the sudden tremor in his hands. He wasn't used to this version of me. He wasn't used to boundaries, to limits, to hearing no, without some softened explanation or apology attached. You're serious, he said, voice low, as if the truth might break if spoken too loudly. I am, I answered, just as softly, but with a strength I had never shown him before. He shook his head slowly, like a man refusing to accept a reality he couldn't control. Mom, this is my child, your granddaughter. Are you really going to let us drown? Are you really going to let your own family suffer like this? Family? That word, the same word he used when it was convenient, the same word he weaponized only when he needed something. It hung in the air between us, heavy and hollow. I didn't flinch. Family, I repeated, letting the word sit there. Yes, I know what family means. It means showing up for each other, respecting each other, including each other. It means you don't shut the door in someone's face and then expect them to clean up your mess. His eyes hardened. This is different. No, I said calmly. It's exactly the same. He stepped closer, his voice turning sharper. You can't really blame us for wanting a peaceful delivery. Alina was stressed. It wasn't personal. I lifted an eyebrow. She never wanted me there. You said that with your own mouth. He opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. Just silence. Guilty, uncomfortable silence. I continued, and now that there's money involved, suddenly I'm needed again. Suddenly I qualify as family. The truth stung him. I could see it. His face faltered, his gaze darted away, and for a moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, he would see the pain he caused, or at least acknowledge it. But people rarely admit the things that shamed them. Instead, he ran a hand over his face and let out a frustrated sigh. This isn't about feelings, it's about responsibility. There it was, the shift, the turning of blame, the positioning of himself as the victim of circumstances he helped create. I looked at him for a long moment. I am not responsible for the choices you made, or the disrespect you allowed. You and your wife made it very clear that I wasn't part of your world. He swallowed hard, anger replacing desperation. So what? You want revenge. You want us to suffer for what happened. You think this makes you the bigger person. I took a slow breath, grounding myself before responding. This isn't revenge. This is me finally honoring myself. Something I should have done years ago. He scoffed. We don't have anyone else to help. I tilted my head. Alina has parents, brothers, sisters, a whole family. Remember, the ones she preferred over me, the ones she wanted by her side at the birth. Those are the people she chose. So those are the people she can turn to. He closed his eyes briefly, jaw tightening. Her family doesn't have that kind of money. I nodded. And I don't have that kind of forgiveness. The words hung in the air like a knife, sharp and undeniable. His eyes snapped open. Mom, please, I'm asking you as your son. That hurt, not because of what he said, but because of what he didn't say. He didn't ask me as someone who loved me. He didn't ask me as someone who realized his mistake. He asked me because he needed something. I walked past him and sat down, because standing made the emotions swirl too much. Daniel, let me ask you something. When you told me not to come in, when you repeated that your wife didn't want me there, did you think about me at all? He froze. I continued. Did you think about the 16-hour trip? Did you think about how excited I was? Did you think about how much it would hurt? His silence was the answer. Or, I said gently, was it easier to pretend I didn't exist in that moment? He shifted uncomfortably, his voice suddenly smaller. Mom, it wasn't like that. But it was, I whispered. He ran a hand down his face again. You're making this bigger than it was. We were overwhelmed. Things were chaotic. So chaotic that you forgot your own mother. I asked, but there was no anger left, just exhaustion. Daniel, I wasn't asking for much, just to be there, just to hold my granddaughter, just to see my son smile without flinching. He stared at the floor. And you know what? I added softly. Even after all of it, even after being pushed away, I still might have helped you. I still might have given whatever I could, because that's who I am. His head snapped up, hope flickering in his eyes. But the hospital called first, I continued. Not you. They told me everything before you did, and that told me exactly what I needed to know. He swallowed. And what's that? That you didn't come here today out of love, I said. You came here out of panic. His face tightened, and for the first time, he didn't try to deny it. I leaned back, letting the truth fill the room. Being a mother doesn't mean I have to destroy myself for people who don't value me. It doesn't mean I owe you everything forever. His voice cracked just slightly. So that's it. You're just going to let us drown. I looked him straight in the eyes. Daniel, I said gently but firmly, you made your choices. Now it's time to live with them. His breath caught, hurt and disbelief mixing in his expression. For the first time, he understood this wasn't a negotiation. This wasn't something he could charm or guilt his way out of. This was a door he had closed himself, and I was finally done standing outside of it. Daniel didn't leave right away. He stood there, in my small living room, shoulders hunched, eyes dark with a mixture of frustration and something else, something deeper, something he didn't want to name. I could almost see the battle inside him, the part that wanted to lash out, the part that wanted to defend himself, and the part, buried under years of pride, that knew I was right. After a long, tense silence, he murmured, Mom, I didn't think it would matter this much to you. The words hit me harder than the rejection at the hospital. Didn't think it would matter. Being excluded from my granddaughter's birth. Being told I wasn't wanted. Being made to feel like an outsider in my own son's life. Daniel, I said slowly, it mattered because you matter, because family matters, because moments like that only happen once. He opened his mouth, but I raised a hand. I traveled 16 hours to be there for you. I sat on buses with crying babies and stiff seats and aching joints, because I wanted to support you, because I believed I was wanted, and you didn't even hesitate before turning me away. He swallowed hard. Regret flashed in his eyes, but regret is useless when it arrives too late. I didn't mean to hurt you, he whispered. Intent doesn't erase impact, I replied. He looked away, his jaw tightening. I could see the defense mechanism clicking back into place. Alina was uncomfortable. You know how she gets. I didn't want to upset her. And what about upsetting me? I asked. He hesitated, just a second, but it was enough. Enough to tell me exactly where I stood in the hierarchy of his priorities. Enough to tell me that for years, he'd chosen peace with her over respect for me. The silence between us settled thickly, pressing on both of us. Finally, Daniel exhaled sharply, pacing the room again. Look, we can talk about everything later, but right now, we need help. The bill is due. We don't have time for all this. There it was again, the urgency, the desperation coated with entitlement. You think we're swimming in money. We're not. Alina's family can't contribute, and I've drained everything we had preparing for the baby. I don't know what else to do. I studied him quietly, taking in the details. He looked worn, unshaven, drained, but in his exhaustion, I also saw a man who had been allowed to depend on me, to Italy, a man who had grown accustomed to me fixing things he broke, a man who thought love meant unconditional sacrifice. Daniel, I said gently, I love you. That has never been the question. But love is not the same as enabling, and I will not let you continue believing that you can treat me however you want and still expect me to rescue you. He ran his fingers through his hair. So what? You're abandoning us. I shook my head. No, I'm teaching you to stand on your own, something I should have done long ago. His face reddened with frustration. This isn't a lesson. This is real life. We're in trouble. And whose fault is that? I asked quietly. He froze. His eyes narrowed. I continued. You married a woman who doesn't respect me. You chose her comfort over my dignity. You shut me out of the birth of my grandchild. And now you want me to pay the price for decisions that you made. He clenched his fists. So, what? You want me to apologize? Fine. I'm sorry. There. Can we move on? The apology was hollow, mechanical, a transaction, not a sentiment. I shook my head. Apologies only mean something when they come with change. He looked at me, frustration turning into something sharper. You're being dramatic. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was unbelievable. Dramatic. I repeated, my voice calm. Daniel, you told me I wasn't wanted at the birth of my first grandchild. If that isn't dramatic, I don't know what is. For a moment, something in his expression faltered, like a small crack in a wall that had stood for years. Vulnerability. Real vulnerability. He sank onto the edge of the sofa, elbows on his knees, head bowed. I messed up, he said, voice low. I know I did, but I was scared. Everything felt chaotic. Alina was having complications. The doctors were rushing around. I didn't know what to do. She was crying, saying she didn't want you there because she felt judged. I wanted everything to go smoothly. It was the closest thing to honesty I had heard from him in years.
I sat across from him, and instead of telling her the truth, that I mattered, you told me to leave. You didn't protect me. You didn't even try. He nodded slowly, not meeting my eyes. I didn't think about how it would affect you. I just wanted to keep the peace. Peace built on disrespect isn't peace, I said softly. We sat in the stillness for a long time, and in that silence, I realized something important. Daniel wasn't just struggling with money. He was struggling with himself, his choices, his marriage, his fear. But none of that excused what he had done. After several minutes, he looked up with red, tired eyes. Mom, what do I do? That was the first real question. The first genuine moment. The first time he wasn't asking for money, he was asking for guidance. I leaned back, choosing my words carefully. You start by taking responsibility, by talking to the hospital yourself, by exploring payment plans, by asking Alina to step up, not just when it's convenient, but when it's necessary. You stop depending on me to solve things you created. He said nothing. I added, and you tell your wife the truth, that respect is not optional, that she can't pick and choose when I matter, that if she wants a family, she must be one. Daniel swallowed hard. She won't like that. For once, I said gently. That's not your problem. He stared at me, and there was a shift, subtle but real. A recognition, a realization, maybe even the beginning of accountability. But then, almost as quickly, fear returned to his expression. If I tell her that, she might get angry. I leaned forward. Daniel, listen to me. If telling your wife that her behavior hurt me is enough to make her angry, then the problem is much bigger than a hospital bill. His lips parted. A truth he didn't want to face flickered in his eyes. And, I added softly, it's a problem only you can fix. He sat back, stunned. Not because he disagreed, but because he finally understood. For the first time, I saw not the little boy I raised or the man I wished he'd become, but the man he truly was. A man standing at a crossroads. And the next steps were entirely his to choose. Daniel leaned back against the couch cushions, staring up at the ceiling like he was searching for answers written somewhere in the cracks. For the first time since he walked in, he wasn't arguing, deflecting, or blaming. He was just thinking, really thinking. And that, to me, was already progress. After a long silence, he said quietly, Mom, if I'm being honest, I don't know how to fix this. Everything feels like it's falling apart. The birth was terrifying. They said there were complications. Alina panicked. I panicked. Then the bills came. I just thought you'd rescue us like you always do. There it was, the truth, raw and unsoftened. I folded my hands in my lap. And why did you think I would? He hesitated before answering. Because you always have. You always show up, even when I mess up, even when I don't deserve it. You're the one person I thought I could lean on. I nodded slowly. Daniel, leaning on someone is different from leaning on them until they break. He looked down at his hands, ashamed. And besides, I added softly, you didn't lean on me that day at the hospital. You pushed me away. He flinched slightly, as if the words themselves bruised him. I know, he whispered. I know I did. I studied his face, tired, older than his age, worn with the weight of new fatherhood mixed with emotional immaturity he had never addressed. And I realized something vital. Daniel didn't fully understand the damage he had done. He understood that I was hurt, yes, but he didn't understand how deep that hurt ran. He had minimized it in his mind, rationalized it away, convinced himself it wasn't that big of a deal. So I decided to make it clear. Daniel, I said gently, do you remember when you broke your arm at 10 years old? He blinked at me, confused. Yeah? You cried the entire drive to the hospital. Every bump in the road hurt. You said the pain was unbearable. He looked down, nodding. And yet, I continued, that pain healed. A few months later, you were running again, climbing trees, forgetting it even happened. But emotional wounds, the ones inflicted by the people we love, those take far longer. Sometimes they never fully heal. His eyes lifted, softer now. Mom, you broke something in me that day, I said quietly. Not dramatic, not blaming, just telling the truth. He swallowed. I didn't realize. No, I said. I agreed. You didn't. Because you never had to. I never let you feel consequences. I never let you face them. I always protected you, even from the truth. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees again. So what do I do now? You start by acknowledging the damage, I said. Not to me, I already know. You need to acknowledge it to yourself. He nodded slowly. And after that, I continued, you take responsibility for your choices, your marriage, your future, your daughter. That last word made him blink hard. My daughter, he repeated softly. I don't want her to grow up watching us treat people like this. There. That was the shift I'd been waiting for. Not guilt. Not fear. Not obligation. Perspective. Good, I said gently. Because the example you set now is the one she'll follow. He leaned back again, breathing deeply. Mom, I'm sorry, really sorry. Not because I need money. Not because I want something. But because I shouldn't have treated you like that. I shouldn't have let Alina treat you like that either. This time, I felt the sincerity. It wasn't rushed, it wasn't forced, and for the first time since he arrived, my chest loosened, just a little. But an apology doesn't erase consequences. Thank you, I said quietly. I accept your apology, but that doesn't mean I'm paying the bill. He nodded without protest. I know. That surprised me. I had expected a last-minute plea, a guilt-filled push, a desperate emotional twist. But instead, Daniel took the words quietly, almost gracefully. He ran his hands over his face. I'll figure something out. I'll talk to the hospital. Maybe they'll give us a payment plan. They will, I said. You'd be surprised how flexible they can be when someone actually communicates with them. He gave a tired, humorless laugh. Yeah, Communication. Not exactly our strength lately. No, I agreed. But that can change, if you let it. He nodded. I want it to. I felt something soften inside me. Not forgiveness exactly, but a step toward it. A tiny crack in the wall I had built around my heart. We sat there quietly for a while, and then Daniel asked, Mom, why didn't you just walk into the room that day? Why didn't you demand to be there? I looked at him with a bittersweet smile. Because I shouldn't have to demand a place in my own family. His expression tightened, guilt flickering again. I should have defended you. Yes, I said softly. You should have. He rubbed his eyes. Mom, can I ask you something else? Of course. Do you want to meet my daughter? Even after everything? The question hit me like a gentle blow. The longing I had held so tightly and tried so hard to suffocate rose straight to the surface. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I kept my voice steady. Yes, Daniel, I want to meet her more than anything. He exhaled shakily, relief washing over his face. I want you to meet her too. I smiled faintly. When the time is right, not as an obligation, not as a band-aid, not because you need me, but because you want me there. He nodded. I understand. I believed him. Finally, he stood up slowly, looking almost unsure of how to leave. I'll talk to Alina. I'll explain everything. I'll tell her she was wrong. I raised an eyebrow. Be gentle, but be firm. He nodded again. I will. As he walked toward the door, he paused with his hand on the handle. Mom? Yes. Thank you for not giving up on me. I smiled, small but real. I never will. But I also won't lose myself again. He nodded, understanding the difference. Then he left. And for the first time in a very long time, the quiet in my home didn't feel lonely. It felt peaceful. After Daniel left, the silence in my house wrapped around me like a warm blanket, soft, calming, full of something I hadn't felt in a long time, self-respect. It wasn't that I didn't love him. I did, more than anything. But for the first time, that love wasn't suffocating me with guilt, obligation, or sacrifice. It wasn't something dragging me down. It was finally balanced. I sat with that feeling for a long moment, letting it settle into my bones like a long overdue truth. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. I wasn't sure why, but there was a sense of quiet anticipation in the air, as if life was shifting around me, rearranging itself in subtle ways. I made myself breakfast, fed my cat, opened my windows, and breathed in the crisp morning air. For the first time in months, I felt light. But peace rarely stays uninterrupted. Around 9, my phone buzzed again, this time with a text from Daniel. Mom, we need to talk. It's important. My stomach tightened slightly. Messages that start with, we need to talk, rarely bring good news. Still, I typed back, okay, come by when you can. That was at 9:03 a.m. He didn't come at 9:30. Or 10 o'clock. Instead, at 10:17, there was a knock on my door. Not Daniel's gentle, conflicted knock. This one was sharp. Fast. Hard. I opened it slowly. And there stood Alina. Her hair was tied up messily. Dark circles under her eyes, her face pale from exhaustion. But her expression was not tired. It was cold. Ice cold. She didn't say hello. She didn't smile. She didn't even look grateful that I had opened the door. She just pushed past me and walked inside. For a moment, I stood there frozen, shocked. Then I shut the door and turned to face her. What are you doing here? I asked calmly. She sighed dramatically, crossing her arms. Daniel said you refused to help us. I raised an eyebrow. I assume he told you why. She scoffed. He told me your feelings were hurt. But this is real life. Feelings don't pay bills. Respect does, I replied. She rolled her eyes so hard I thought they might stay stuck. Look, I'm not here for a therapy session. The hospital bill is due, and we don't have the money. You do. Something hot rose in my chest. Not anger, but clarity. No, I said. I don't. Her head snapped up. Excuse me? I don't have money for people who treat me like I don't matter. She took a step closer. Her voice sharp and defensive. You're his mother. You're supposed to help. Being a mother doesn't make me your bank. She opened her mouth again, but I lifted a hand. And while we're at it, I added, being your mother-in-law should mean something too. But you made it very clear that it doesn't. She let out a breathless laugh, mocking, dismissive. Are you seriously still upset about the birth? It was my delivery. My body. I get to choose who's in the room. You absolutely do. I agreed. But choices have consequences. You chose to exclude me. Now you face this one. Her expression darkened. So you're punishing us? No, I said evenly. I'm respecting myself. She glared, pacing like a frustrated child. Daniel said you're being emotional. But I'm going to be blunt. We need your help. You're the only one who can fix this. The entitlement in her voice was astonishing. Alina, I said slowly, I'm going to tell you something you should have learned a long time ago. You can't mistreat people and then expect them to save you. That's not how life works. She raised her chin stubbornly. We're family. Family helps family. I let out a small breath. You didn't consider me family when you told me not to come in the room. That was different. No, I said softly. It wasn't. Her lips tightened. Daniel said. I don't care what Daniel said. I interrupted gently. I care about what happened. She pressed her lips together so tightly, her jaw trembled. Then, she said something I will never forget. I didn't want you there, because you make everything about yourself. For a moment, the world stopped. My breath caught. My heart paused. Not because it was true, but because she really believed that. I didn't speak for several seconds. I let the weight of her words sit there. Then finally, I replied quietly. I traveled 16 hours to support you. I brought gifts. I brought love. I brought excitement, and you sent me away. She looked away. I continued. That moment wasn't about me. It was about all of us, about family, about welcoming a new life into the world, and I would have been happy to stand in a corner silently. I didn't need attention. I just wanted to be there. Alina crossed her arms again, but her face softened, very slightly. Fine. Maybe I overreacted. I was overwhelmed. But right now, we need help. I understand, I said gently, but needing help doesn't erase how I was treated. She hesitated, searching for the right words. And finally, she said the one thing I didn't expect. So what do you want from us? Respect, I answered. Nothing more, nothing less. She swallowed. And if we give you that, will you help? I shook my head slowly. No. Her eyes widened. What? Even after all that? Yes, I said gently. Because respect should be genuine, earned, not purchased with guilt or desperation. For once, she had no comeback. No eye roll. No sharp retort. Just quiet. A long, heavy, uncomfortable quiet. And in that silence, she realized something Daniel already had. I wasn't the same woman anymore. She looked at the floor, her voice smaller. What do we do now? You figure it out together, I said. As a team, as partners, as parents. Because that's what a family does. She closed her eyes, taking a shaky breath. And for the first time since she entered my home, she nodded. Just once. A small nod, but a real one. Without another word, she walked toward the door. And when she opened it, she paused, her hand still on the knob. Then she whispered, "I'm sorry." It wasn't much. It wasn't enough. But it was a start. She left quietly, and the silence that followed wasn't cold this time. It was hopeful. For the rest of the day, after Alina left, my house felt strangely peaceful. Like the air had settled, the storm had passed, and all that remained was the soft quiet after a long, heavy rain. I moved slowly through my routines, thinking about everything that had happened, everything that had been said, and everything that had changed. I didn't hate Alina. I didn't even blame her fully. Life is complicated, and childbirth makes emotions erupt in ways people don't expect. But she had crossed a line she didn't know how to uncross, and I, after years of bending, had finally stood tall. It felt good. It felt right. Later in the evening, as I was watering my plants, my phone vibrated again. This time, the screen showed a picture, a newborn, tiny, pink, wrapped in a blanket with small blue flowers. A little fist, raised like she was already ready to fight the world. Below it, a message from Daniel. "Mom, this is Emily. I wanted you to see her first smile today." I sat down, my knees suddenly unsteady. My eyes burned, my throat tightened. A smile, her tiny lips curled up, just a gentleness, a softness, but enough to melt any remaining pieces of bitterness inside me. He sent another message. "She looks like you. I didn't see it before." My hand trembled slightly as I typed back, "She's beautiful. Truly beautiful." But inside there was a hesitation, a quiet ache. A longing for the moment I should have had, seeing her in person, holding her, whispering hello for the first time. But that moment was already gone, and I had to accept that. A few minutes later, Daniel called. This time, I picked up. His voice was softer than I'd heard in years. "Mom, are you there?" "I'm here," I said. There was silence on the line before he spoke again. "I know I shouldn't have let Alina speak to you like that. And I know I shouldn't have asked you to pay the bill after we treated you that way. I've been thinking about everything." I didn't interrupt. He needed to say this. "You always helped me," he continued. "Always. And I took that for granted. I thought, I don't know, that you'd always just be there, no matter how we acted." "That's not uncommon," I said softly. "We're mothers. People assume we're unbreakable." He breathed out slowly. "You're not. I see that now. And I'm sorry. Really sorry." Something inside me cracked, not in pain, but relief. A mother waits her whole life to hear certain words from her child. And these warmed me to my core. "Thank you," I whispered. "That means more than you know." "Mom," his voice trembled. "Are we okay?" I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. "We're healing. That's enough for now." He let out a tiny laugh. Sad, hopeful, grateful, all at once. "I'll take that." Then he said quietly, "Alina told me what she said to you today." "Oh?" I asked. "She said she apologized." "She did. She also said she felt something change in you, like she couldn't push you anymore." I smiled faintly. "Maybe that's for the best." He hesitated. "She's scared you don't like her anymore." I shook my head, even though he couldn't see it. "I don't dislike her, Daniel. I just needed boundaries, and she needed to understand them." "Do you think someday things could go back to normal?" "No," I said gently. "Not normal. But they can get better, healthier, more respectful." He exhaled. "I hope so." There was a pause, then, "Mom, will you come see the baby?" The question hung there, tender, careful, uncertain. My heart stuttered. "I want to," I said, "but I don't want to force myself into a space where I'm unwelcome." "You're not unwelcome," he said immediately. "Not anymore. I'll make sure of it." I thought for a long moment, then, "I'll come tomorrow, for a short visit." There was relief in his voice, pure and bright. "Thank you, Mom. Really, thank you." When we hung up, I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. Tomorrow, I would finally meet my granddaughter. The night passed slowly, anticipation, nerves, and excitement all twining together like threads. I barely slept, drifting in and out until the morning light softly touched my curtains. By 10 a.m., I was standing outside their home. My heart pounded in my chest, not from fear, but from something deeper, something layered with love and hope and the remnants of old hurt. I rang the doorbell and heard shuffling inside. The door opened, and there was Daniel, holding Emily. She was even smaller than the photo suggested, a tiny bundle of quiet breathing and soft skin, her little face scrunched like she was dreaming something important. Daniel stepped aside. "Come in." I did. The air was warm, carrying the faint smell of baby powder and lavender. Alina was sitting on the couch. She looked nervous, genuinely nervous, not defensive, not angry, not superior, just human. "Hi," she said softly. "Hello, Alina." She cleared her throat. "Thank you for coming." "Thank you for inviting me," I replied. Daniel walked closer and gently transferred Emily into my arms. The moment her tiny weight settled there, everything inside me shattered and rebuilt itself in the same breath. Her warmth, her softness, her quiet breaths. My granddaughter. Tears blurred my vision as I whispered, "Hello, sweet girl." Her little hand twitched, brushing against my chest, and I felt something inside me expand, filling every hollow space. This moment was worth every pain, every mile traveled, every tear shed. For several minutes, no one spoke. Not Daniel, not Alina. Just me and Emily, 2 generations meeting for the first time. When I finally looked up, I saw something unexpected. Alina was crying, quietly, controlled, but real tears. "I was wrong," she whispered. "You should have been there. I didn't realize how much it mattered to you, or to him, or to her." I nodded slowly, still rocking Emily. "Thank you for saying that." She swallowed. "I want us to start over, if you're willing." I looked at her. The woman who had hurt me, the woman who had feared me, the woman who didn't understand me, and now the woman who was trying. "I'm willing," I said softly, "as long as we treat each other with respect." She nodded. "Deal." Daniel sat beside her, taking her hand. They looked like a family again, not perfect, but learning, healing, growing. I stayed for 2 hours. We talked, we laughed a little, we cried a little. We shared stories about Daniel's childhood. I held Emily the whole time, memorizing every tiny detail of her face. And when I finally stood to leave, Daniel hugged me tightly, longer than he had in years. "Mom," he said quietly, "thank you for standing up for yourself. It changed everything." I smiled. Sometimes a mother has to teach even grown children how to treat her. He laughed, wiping his eyes. Point taken. As I stepped outside, the sunlight warm on my face, I felt it deep in my heart. This wasn't just a family restored. It was a woman restored. A grandmother, a mother, a self, stronger than before, wiser than before, and finally, respected.